Zay. Zay's here. Okay,
Yeah.
so I would like to start the meeting of the Legislative Committee for this Tuesday, March 14th. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. That's my call to order. Let's take roll call, please.
Member Chaplin? Member Childress?
Yes.
Chair DeSart?
Here.
Member Eckhoff?
Here.
Member Glassy? Member Zay?
Here.
And thank you so much. I move to approve the minutes of the Legislative Committee meeting from Tuesday, February 21st,
So
2023. I moved it, so would you like to second it, Member
I'm
Childress?
sorry, second.
All right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Do we have any public comment?
None provided.
Awesome. Okay, so I have no chairman's remarks at this time, except that I'm excited to go over our bill list. But before we get to our bill list, I would like to introduce let's see, maybe one of our first meetings after the election, we had Joe McCoy on to introduce himself. Joe is Executive Director of the Illinois State Association of Counties, or ISACO. Joe, welcome back. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. So we had you on a couple of months ago to introduce yourself. Now we'd just like to hear what ISACO and your overview for the spring legislative session is. Have you seen our bill list and our legislative agenda? And how does that, so my two questions are, please give us an overview. And secondly, how does our county agenda complement ISACO's agenda?
Well, sure. Chair DeSart, members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to participate in your meeting today. And I wanted to thank Cheryl Marquet too for the good work that she does. I'm in frequent communication with her about DuPage County's priorities and interacting with her about what ISACO is working on. I know it's a long day for all of you, being County Board Day, and I want to be cognizant of your time. So I want to also thank you for your membership, but I'll jump right in. Last Friday was the first notable deadline. Bills had to be approved by the House and Senate committees. There were approximately 6,500 bills filed for consideration, and there weren't many scheduled session days prior to the first committee deadline. This compressed timetable effectively killed off most of the bills. There were a good number of bills that were approved with the sponsors promising to work out disagreements and come back with amendments. But I think it's probably safe to assume that many of those bills won't advance before the March 24th deadline to move bills out of their chamber of origin. Yesterday, for those of you who had the opportunity to review our News and Views newsletter, we linked to a 30-page report in the newsletter that includes a summary of each ISACO tracked bill that was approved by the House and Senate committees just last week. And just last week, ISACO took registered positions on probably close to 30 bills. And so far this session, we've registered positions on dozens of bills as part of our legislative strategy to be an umbrella in making sure that counties have a position. We weigh in on all the bills that affect counties. Overall, ISACO is tracking more than 900 bills. And this is, if you're curious, this is approximately 14% of all the introduced bills among the 6,500 total. These bills are all searchable in various ways on our bill tracking system, which you can find on our website at www.isacoil.org. ISACO introduced two legislative initiatives this year. One bill, Senate Bill 1226, would allow counties to utilize a disparity study for establishing design-build project minority contracting goals. This is an initiative that we did receive from DuPage County. It's still in the Senate Assignments Committee, and I have met with the Chief of Staff to Senate President Harmon and also the Senate Democrats' Chief Legal Counsel to discuss the concerns that the Democrats have in the Senate with using disparity studies instead of the state's minority contracting goals. These meetings were very helpful, and our next objective, for myself and our lobbyists, is to meet with specific legislators about the bill. Our second initiative is Senate Bill 2071, and it would allow for county officials to be appointed to the Restore, Reinvest, and Renew Program Board. This board was created by the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act to oversee investments in disadvantaged communities. Currently, municipal officials can be appointed to the board, and we're seeking to make the appointment of county officials permissible as well. We may have an opportunity based on conversations that I've had with some staff members in the Senate. We may have an opportunity to include this language in an omnibus cannabis bill that emerges later during the spring session. Chair Dessart, you mentioned DuPage County's initiatives and the bills that you're reviewing. House Bill 3053, which is your initiative in the House, which is similar to the design build legislation we introduced in the Senate. We're supportive of that, of course. And then Senate Bill 1499, which is your animal forfeiture bill, we're also supportive of that bill as well. Speaking of county initiatives, member county initiatives, we have a section in our tracked bill list on our website where you can find bills that are introduced by ASACO member counties, including DuPage. And I want to make sure that you're aware of that, just in case you're curious about what some of your neighboring counties have introduced. And again, that's available on our website. And to the bills that you're going to be discussing today, I think you had 30 or 32 of those bills. And I can tell you that ISACO supports 17 of them, and we have no position on the others. I wanted to talk briefly about the local government distributive fund. That's a top issue that we're working on this year to increase the county and municipal share of income tax revenue distributed through LGDF. You may be aware that the county share once upon a time was 10% of total collections, but that was reduced in 2011, and we've been seeking to get increases since then. We did get a modest increase last year. One of ISACO's goals is to build a coalition with municipal associations to advance issues of common interest. This hasn't really existed before on a statewide basis between municipalities and counties, and we see that as one of the roles of ISACO to try to encourage that. In the case of LGDF, we're partnering with the DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference, other regional councils of government, and the Illinois Municipal League in pursuit of additional LGDF revenue for counties and municipalities. ISACO is actually contributing financially to the coalition for media relations and other services in support of our objective, which is, again, to increase county revenues. And finally, by way of my formal remarks here, I wanted to take the opportunity to encourage DuPage County to become more involved in NACO. This would include county board members joining the various policy steering committees and standing committees, and also attending the legislative and annual conferences. The conference coming up this July is in Travis County, Texas, where Boston is. Last week, I had a conversation with board member LaPlante, and we were able to get her appointed to NACO's Arts and Culture Commission, and I know she's excited about that. She told me about some of the initiatives that she's pursued in the county, and she would like to be able to talk to her peers nationwide about those to see if maybe there's some interest in exporting some of those great ideas nationally. So she'll have an opportunity to do that as part of that commission. And I think it's important for Illinois, as one of the larger states, to have a strong decision-making and participation in the decision-making and policy process at NACO. We're fortunate at this time to have the current president from Illinois, and that's Denise Winfrey, a Will County board member. Some of you may know Denise. Kendall County Circuit Clerk, Matt Prochaska, who's also ISACO's president. He is the chair of membership for NACO. We have 6 NACO board members from Illinois, including Mary Keating, who you all know. And there are, as I said, a multitude of standing committees and policy steering committees, and DuPage County, being our second largest county, a very influential county, should definitely have more representation on those committees. I'd be happy to work with you to plug you into NACO. And at this point, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you might have. And again, I really appreciate the opportunity to participate in this meeting. And I actually eavesdropped on some of your county board meeting too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Joe. I will tell you that our brand new DuPage County Chairwoman, Deb Conroy, just named member Sheila Rutledge to be our NACO representative. So that happened recently. So that's member Sheila Rutledge to NACO. And just FYI, I did attend the legislative conference. Was it last year or the year before? But it was via Zoom. So I attended.
Very good.
Yeah, and it was excellent. I got a lot of great information about it. Okay, members, do you have any questions for Joe?
Joe, I did have one question, Madam Chair.
Yeah, please. Members,
How many shell bills were put forward by the leadership
Oh, yeah, at one point I knew the exact number. It's hundreds. I don't remember the exact number at this point, but there's a multitude of them. And that's pretty typical. They introduce those bills, and over the course of this session or this year and next year, they'll use those shell bills to amend language onto. They just like to control them for that purpose.
Right. Joe, my concern is that they pushed all these bills through with hardly any session. There's no first readings. They have this handshake agreement, whatever it is, that they'll amend on the second reading. I mean, how can we take stances on anything when legislation could really change overnight?
It can, and so I can tell you that ISACO reviews the introduced bills. Obviously, the technical bills or the shell bills, we're aware of them. We don't include them in our tracker, but the bills that are of interest or affect counties, we include in our bill tracking system. And insofar as they have substantive language when they're introduced, we, in some cases, take a position of support or oppose. The key is, and I think this gets at what you're talking about, is as the session progresses, we get into the crazy season where amendments are filed, and they drop very quickly, and we have very little time to analyze them. And I think that's when it becomes somewhat perilous, and that's why it's really important that ISACO stay on top of those amendments and communicate out to DuPage County and other member counties what's being proposed. And speed, the name of this game is speed. It's getting on top of things as quickly as possible, because once the train begins to leave the station, you can lose control very quickly.
Thank you.
Yeah. Member
I
Chaplin.
have one question, Joe. A few years ago, legislation was changed that required sheriffs to have a law enforcement background to run for sheriff. I think it was just passed in 2020 or 2020.
Yes.
Okay. So now I'm seeing some states are now asking that their law enforcement sheriffs also, that they have a behavioral health background. So there was, I know in California, they're pushing to have a requirement, not so much in law enforcement, but in mental health. So I'm wondering if you've heard anything else about that with other counties, or what was the reason behind changing that to have law enforcement criteria for the sheriff? I mean, it was for hundreds of years, 100 years that they never had the requirement, and then they changed it in was it 2020 or 2022?
I think it was 2020 or 2021, if memory serves. Now, I suspect that the reason they did that is because the sheriff in Macon County did not have a law enforcement background, but he was, I think, the son of Warren Buffett, and was a big philanthropist and very involved in providing support to the law enforcement community in Macon County, and eventually became the sheriff without the formal law enforcement background. And the bill came out around that time, so I suspect there was a correlation there. I know Macon County, when I talked to the chairman down there, they had a good relationship with the sheriff and were interested in him staying in office, but ultimately he wasn't able to. But that might be one of the reasons why it was introduced.
Okay, just because with the number of people with mental health issues in our jails, and with the addiction too that are in our jails, huge addiction problem, that maybe it's something that we need to start looking into, that our sheriff should be a position of somebody that worked in, maybe public or mental health, or add that in, but I think having just with law enforcement really limits, who can run for, sheriff. So maybe that's something we can discuss as a committee.
It makes a lot of sense as the atmosphere is changing toward, mental health and behavioral health when it comes to these law enforcement issues. I mean, didn't they say like the majority of law enforcement service calls are due to mental health issues? Yeah. And it makes a whole lot more sense to have social workers or psychologists or whatever on these calls rather than a militarized law enforcement.
Or together.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just something to think about. I know I've pushed for that. So thank you, Jim.
I appreciate that. There's a definite logic to it because I know, I mean, we're on the precipice of a serious mental health crisis in this country. Some would argue we're in the midst of it, and some would argue we're kind of at the precipice, I suppose. But that's going to be an issue that's going to be talked about extensively, I think, going forward. How do we deal with that?
Member Eckhoff, then member you, after member Eckhoff?
Well, I just wanted to follow up with what Mr. Zay said, is that, the process in Springfield seems to be geared to, like you said, move quickly. And if the people down in Springfield have had these bills for 2 or 3 months, and they've been considering them, and they're probably considering amendments. And for us to get these on a Thursday and be expected to be fully informed when we really don't have a pro and a con to each one. And I know that our chairperson here and our staff has been working hard on all this. I'm not criticizing any of them for any of this, but I just don't think it's fair to our committee. So I'm not really prepared to endorse anyone. And I can give you a couple examples. Yesterday, I'm on the ETSB board, and we had somebody in there who said that there's a shell bill regarding ETSB functions. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I'd probably see it when I've gone through the shell bills.
Well, it's in our packet, and it's designated to do one thing, but the person yesterday at ETSB was saying that it's a shell bill designed to bring down more regulations and guidelines and dictates from Springfield, whereas the ETSB board was when it was originally set up 30, 40 years ago, was supposed to be a local governmental agency, and that's something that took the dictates from Springfield. So that would be a problem I think we as a county would have, and many other counties would have. I see a lot of pros and cons to a lot of these bills, and I don't see where, and I could go through a couple more. I don't want to take the whole committee's time to do it, but that's why I'm not looking for it. I'm not going to vote for any of this stuff today because I don't think we know where it's going tomorrow.
Well, we don't. I mean, that's the nature of Springfield. We don't know what's going on in Springfield tomorrow, right? Okay, member you.
Thank you. So, actually, just in response to.
Yeah, you were there too.
Member Eckhoff, what you were saying, the person who stated that was actually a person who was not on the board, and it was through public comment. And I think I think member Eckhoff's main concern was that he was suggesting that that instead of local control, it would become more regional, and the control would become further, further out. So I don't know if that's actually the case, and if that is stated in the bill itself. Do you happen to know, Joe?
I don't, but I appreciate you raising this. I wrote it down, and now that I know that this is an issue that's conceivably out there, I will take a look at it for sure.
After the meeting, I spoke to the individual that spoke during public comment, and he said sort of what you said. And then I talked to member Tillman, who's on the board, because he's really involved in that, and he verified and confirmed with the person at public hearing.
So Joe, if you could get more information about that and then share Sharon Marquet, and then she'll get it out to the committee.
And I think it's
Sure. And if I may, just so I'm clear, what you're saying is that there's a ETSB shell bill, and there's discussion about there possibly being an amendment that would adopt like a regional concept.
It's HB 3940.
Well, that bill right now, if I may, that bill is not a shell bill.
It's not a shell.
It has language to extend the sunset of the wireless surcharge, which is $1.50 that you see on your phone bill
Placed on
for 2
second
years.
reading.
So it's not a shell bill. Now, it might be amended to include more language, and Linda Zerwin's the expert here, but the state has, and Joe's aware of this.
Yeah.
For the years, the state has dictated some mandates, i.e. you're gonna reduce the number of PSAPs that you have. We used to have 19 public safety answering points or dispatch centers in DuPage County. Thanks to you and Linda, the members of the board, we're down to 2. So that has been a statewide mandate, but it saved money because as the equipment became more expensive, we couldn't have 19 dispatch. It didn't make sense. The sheriff just got rid of his dispatch center last year. So the coordination, that makes sense. I don't know what else they're looking at, but the state has next generation 911. you have to be able to dial 911 anywhere in the state. So there are some statewide mandates that are appropriate. This may not be, but there is a role for the state to play in 911 for that reason.
Remember you, it seemed like you had more, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
thank you. I just had a quick question. You had mentioned earlier that there was a bill that had to do with disparity studies I'm sorry, what was the bill number?
There are a couple of them. So the bill that you have introduced is House Bill 3053. And the bill that we introduced is Senate Bill 1226. And ISACO passed a similar bill through the House last year, and then it stalled in the Senate. So we began ours in the Senate this year. And I know that we have some explaining and convincing to do with the minority, with the Black Caucus members in particular, to explain what we're trying to accomplish with the disparity study and in weaving it together with design build. And the conversations that I had with the top staff members for Senate President Harmon were optimistic in that now at least I have a roadmap of who exactly we need to talk to about these disparity studies. Because the issue is the state has their own utilization goals, and they're very difficult, I think, for certain counties to meet. They're very ambitious. And our position is that we definitely want to have minority contracting goals, but they need to be reflective of the demographic realities in a county and what businesses are available to do to perform the contract in those counties.
Thank you.
Member Chaplin.
Yeah, just along those lines of the DBE. Again, a couple years ago, Cheryl, I think, right, there was a reporting requirement, right, that the counties had to report on their DBEs.
Right, the vendor
by a
disclosure,
certain-
right. Mhm.
Do we ever do that? I don't even remember. Were we able to ever even do that?
I think so. So part of the ad hoc committee that the county had last year on diversity and inclusion, they recommended the county buy software, this
Oh, that's right.
BG2, am I saying it right? Software to start tracking officially. Then the county board funded a disparity study, which we should be getting in June. And to Joe's point, and I understand the Black and Latino caucus think we're trying to reduce the percentages. The state percentages are like 20 and 30%.
Yeah.
The problem is you have to look at the contractors that are available in the region and your utilization. And then this disparity study calculates a percentage, whether it's 5%, 10%, 15%, because you're really subjected to a lot of lawsuits by contractors if you can't defend your goals. And yes, it might be less than 20%, especially downstate in other areas. Colette Holt, who's doing the county's disparity study, she's looking at the entire region. She's not looking at contractors in DuPage, but Cook and all over to see the availability. On the same vein, the county board did fund our Choose DuPage Economic Development Corporation to set up a supplier diversity program called Connect DuPage. And they have a portal. So if I'm Nicor Gas, I can go on there. And if I want to hire a minority contractor, there's a complete inventory. In addition to that, the biggest problem has been getting minority, smaller contractors certified. That's a very laborious process. The good news is College of DuPage, their small business center, can certify businesses, and Choose DuPage just hired Rita, I forget her last name, from COD, and she will free of charge provide counseling and mentorship to these small businesses to get them certified. There's 5 different types of certification for disadvantaged business enterprise programs. You don't need all 5. It depends on the area of procurement you want to be in. But I guess the county is trying to look at it, you know, holistically. We're trying to increase the number of minority vendors because you can't contract them if you don't have them. But we're also, the state attorney's office has told us we need this legislation, because if we don't have this legislation, and you start a program, you're gonna have a lot of problems in terms of legal lawsuits. Yeah.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Other questions or comments for Joe? Okay, Joe, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. We'll have you back.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You know, just by way of chairwoman's reports or comments, I really want to say this sincerely with all my heart, that, you know, there were like 6,500 bills filed, 6,500 bills. And this woman over here, Cheryl Marquet, has read the bills, gone through the bills, sorted the bills, put them in our priority packs. She has done, I don't even know how you stay sane, because then she's like, okay,
used to
this
work
never
there,
went to
that's why.
committee, this did go to
You know,
committee,
something.
this didn't go to committee, this one's not even being talked about anymore. I mean, how you distill 6,500 bills down to our little list here, you're incredible. Thank you so much.
Well, and thank you. And
You're amazing.
and I know, I understand what Member Eckhoff's saying because they introduced the bills between January 20th and February 17th. So that's the window they introduced the bills. Then all the bills have to be out of committee by March 10th. So you try and Joe's a great partner. I work with DuPage mayors and managers, but the roadmap you gave staff in January listed the 11 priorities: animals, environment, revenues, child tax credit. So then I look at the priorities and then I pull from that, what bills are still moving? Because as Joe said, 70% of the bills have died.
Right.
A lot of the bills that are on here, especially the mental health. So we know mental health is a priority for the chair. I actually printed about 65, 70 mental health bills, gave them to her. She took them home, came back the next day and said, you want to focus on these 8 or 9.
Yeah.
So I totally deferred to her because I am not a mental health expert. And the health department was like, we don't know where to start. So that was really helpful. Remember Rutledge's environmental committee, her 3 priorities have been the carpet stewardship, the paint recycling, and the packaging. So those are, some of those died. There's a few that are still moving. So those are on there. The Extension Emergency Telephone System Act is on there. Some of the animal bills, Laura Flamian's on the call. There's a lot of animal bills. I just put the ones that really impact the county shelter on there, but that's where these bills come from. Now, like Joe, I'm monitoring about 300 bills to see if they move, to see if they get amended. And I think, Member Eckhoff made a good point. The reason we have lobbyists, there's 2 reasons. One, we need Joe McCoy because he's looking overall at the state, bills that affect our authority or revenues. We need lobbyists because our focus has been on animals and environment and mental health, which necessarily is not Macon County's priorities, right? So we're not going to always share the same priorities, but we have the strength of each other to help. And unfortunately, as Member Zay said, after working in Springfield for 16 years, the way this works is that they take a shell bill, they pop it out, they do a posting, and you have an hour. And so you have to be on your game down there. You have to know what's going on. And they could take one of these bills that we're supporting, gut it, and put on new language that I know just from a common sense standpoint, this board will never support. And when that happens, you have to have lobbyists on the ground because none of us can get in our cars and get down there in 3 hours. So when that happens, I called Chair Desart, called Chair Conroy and say, look, this is going on. And they give me the authority. Sometimes members call me from the floor and say, how should I vote? And I have to give an answer. So I do the best I can. But you're right. You never know. Today, House Bill 101 is not what House Bill 101 is tomorrow. And that's why you have lobbyists and Joe McCoy and people on the ground to communicate that to you.
And things change so much. Somebody
Yeah,
asked
they
me, do we have to meet on the 14th? Can't we wait 2 weeks? And no, because things in Springfield happen so fast.
Right,
No,
the bills are
we
gonna be out of
can't.
committee. So I've had
Right.
3 members of our delegation ask me for a bill list. They have our agenda, but they said, what are you supporting? And I said, well, I have to go to committee. This is an initial list. So they're looking for this list before they vote the bills out on March 24th.
So Cheryl Marquez has looked through our legislative priorities that we submitted in January, February, and she went through 6,500 or so bills and gelled them down to this. I know Member Eckhoff has said he doesn't have time to read each and every one of these bills. And can't vote for this, and that's fine, Member Eckhoff. I'm not trying to call you out. I'm just saying that I trust that Cheryl and staff have gone through our priorities and have gelled them or distilled them down to these priorities. So I am prepared to vote for these based on staff recommendations. Do we have any comments or questions about what we're voting on? Actually, let me do this. Let me move to pass the action item 7A 23-1073. The action item is the key bill list 314-2023. I moved, member Chaplin seconded it. Comments, questions, concerns?
Let me just sort of clarify what you just said.
Sure.
It's not the reading of everything, it's also getting the pros and the cons. And I'll give you an example based on one that's near and dear to your heart and my heart, which is cats.
Yeah,
Okay,
I have
because
to.
I've had 6 cats, I've got 2 now, I've never declawed cats. I've encouraged people not to declaw
It
cats.
causes arthritis.
Yeah, but what happens if people who adopt cats will only adopt them if they're declawed? Somebody asked the question and finds out that, well, now our shelter is gonna have to euthanize 500 cats because they're not being adopted because they can't declaw them.
Perfect. Laura Flamian is on this call. Laura, can you answer to that? Is this?
Hi, yes. Good morning, everybody. I apologize. I don't have my camera on. I'm on vacation today and tomorrow, so I'm not appropriate. But yeah, so I'm glad that Member Eckhoff is asking that question, and so pleased to see that this bill is on the list. So thank you. You know, I can say from experience that we're not euthanizing cats because people won't adopt them due to not being declawed. We actually have conversations with people that come in looking specifically for declawed cats or talk about declawing cats. And when we add that piece of education and just awareness into what declawing process actually is and does, we see a lot of people say, yeah, no, that's fine. You know, we're going to use other methods to deter unwanting scratching behaviors. So I can tell you that we are definitely not euthanizing animals because they're not declawed. We do periodically get cats in that are already declawed, and we may have people that are looking for that specifically, and we indicate that on our adoption pages. I do have an example, though, of somebody that brought me a 13-year-old cat just last week. They had declawed it at age 6, and the cat started having inappropriate litter box challenges. They put up with it for, you know, well over 6 more years, but had just come to their wits' end and could no longer handle the fact that the cat was not using the litter box, but it was directly related in a time frame to when they declawed the cat. And that's not to say that all declawing procedures result in inappropriate elimination or some of the phantom pain or other things. But we really aren't seeing anybody say that they won't adopt because the cats aren't declawed, or B, cats being surrendered even for unwanted scratching behaviors. A lot of the surrender reasons, which we do track, are related to other personal issues that they're having just in general, but nobody's really surrendering their cats because they're scratching furniture or people. And when we're already seeing this, at least, 40 plus other countries have made declawing illegal. We've also started seeing a lot of our larger animal hospital chains, Banfield, VCA, I think Blue Pearl also, all across the country are no longer offering these procedures.
There is an exemption, the bill was amended. There is an exemption for a vet to perform a declawing if there's a therapeutic reason, only a vet. So there is an out, I guess.
Correct. And we actually have it in our adoption contract, and we go over the adoption contract with the new pet owner that about our strong position on not declawing cats, and that we ask that they not do that if they're adopting a cat from us.
Member Eckhoff?
Well, you're sort of losing my point. I didn't bring this up to debate this particular bill. I'm bringing up the point that there's not pros and cons on a lot of this stuff. I'm a member of another collection group of attorneys that there's a bill, and I don't know if it's in this, where it's trying to reduce the number of years you can collect on a bill, the interest rate that's being collected on the debt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And everybody thinks it's a great, the people pushing it think it's a great bill because it's gonna help people avoid paying debt and they won't have to pay as much. But the con of it is that what happens with credit agencies is that they move out of the city so that the people who are taking those high interest rate debts don't have anywhere to get a loan from.
I don't think that's one of our priorities.
I
Our
know
legislative
it's not.
priorities.
You're missing my point. My point is there should be a pro and a con on every single one of these and not have to sit here for the next 2 days trying to figure out which ones we've got questions on. It's not your fault. It's not staff's fault. It's that nature of the beast and the way that Springfield's does this, that it doesn't, we're supposed to come to a conclusion about these bills that have been in front of them for 6 months or 6 weeks, sorry. And we're supposed to in a weekend try and figure this out, and it's the wrong way to do it.
Member Chaplin?
Thank you, Chairwoman. So the way I look at it, these bills were brought forward, staff, we gave them our legislative priorities. Cheryl went through the bills and she brought the bills forward that she believed met our legislative priorities. There's nothing here about your issue. These are all things that have to do with what I'm looking at: animals, the environment, mental health, child tax credits, Medicaid, I mean, you know, psychiatric things. So this is also bills that we're opposing. These are all fall within our legislative agenda.
That's
So I don't know why you would, you know, I mean, if you want to, this is how we've always done this since.
This is the first time I'm on the committee.
Oh, this is how the
I'm saying
committee
it's
has
the wrong
always
way to
done it.
do it, and I'm gonna vote against it.
Okay,
So
we
let's
can
call
vote
the
against
question
it.
and be
Let's
done
go.
with it.
Let's go.
I'll be here till 3 o'clock arguing this if you want to, but it's a waste of time. So
It's
either
just
vote
big
yes or vote
ideas
no.
distilled down to bills that we support. Other conversation. Questions? Yes, Member Pete Garcia.
Yeah, I'm just excited about some of these bills. So I'm just gonna talk about how I'm excited about them. I mean, we've got the banning of the foam disposable food containers. I
Yep,
think
yep.
that's fantastic. We've got a behavioral health center, a grant pilot program. We're gonna be doing that here, and so I think this is something that I would love to see come forward. I guess my only question was, there was some issues with the ban on selling puppy mill dogs, I believe. Is that
It's
still?
back. It's
Yeah,
passed
they're
out of
back.
committee.
And that's-
House Bill 2793 would actually reverse the puppy mill ban that the county got passed 2 years ago.
And we're
And that-
opposing
Yeah,
it.
right.
Right.
And we are,
Okay,
it's
I missed
the,
that.
yeah,
Okay.
it's also related to the definition of dog dealer,
Correct.
the homes, Senate Bill 1230. Definition of dog dealer to exclude specific retail sales. That's how the puppy mill people are getting around our puppy mill ban.
Okay,
So,
we're
and
taking the
that's our
stance as
support.
opposing that, as I see here now, so.
We're supporting Senate Bill 1230 because
Right.
it closes the loophole because they're getting this dog dealer license to sell at retail, which is not appropriate.
Okay.
And then opposing the flip of the puppy mill ban. It's such a lucrative business. Every year they just keep trying. And it's really tough because they hired about 20 lobbyists. And so our lobbyists spent a lot of time
Yeah.
fighting that repeal, but Laura can speak to, you know, the cost to not only the lives of these animals, but the people that are buying these animals at $3,000, $4,000, they're sick. And
Spending
they end up in our
hundreds and
shelter
hundreds of
and we have to
thousands.
care for them. And so that's why there's a tight accounting
Right,
government.
spending thousands in medical bills for these sick animals.
Absolutely.
And-
Um,
Thank you.
Comments, questions? Okay, it sounds like we need a roll call vote. Heidi, thank you.
Member Chaplin.
Aye.
Member Childress.
Aye.
Chair DeSart.
Aye.
Member Echo.
No.
Member Zay.
Okay, that vote passes. Thank you so much. Do we have any old business? Yes.
Madam Chair, I'd like to reconsider the minutes, if that's possible.
Sure.
It just needs, I think, to be noted that Member Chaplin and myself were in transportation when the meeting took place. Is
Absolutely.
that okay? Just,
Yeah,
can we just make a
absolutely.
little line there? We were still absent, but just a little
Of course.
note that we're
What do we need
transportation.
to do to make that happen? legally?
So you've got a motion to reconsider the approval of the minutes. You should have a second on that. Is there
I'll
a
second it.
So there's a motion and a second to reconsider the minutes. There should be a voice vote as to
All
the
in
motion.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and you wanted to amend
Any
the
opposed?
minutes to reflect
To show that Member Chaplin and I were absent, but in transportation committee.
so that Mr. Zay has made a motion to amend the minutes in the manner he described that I'm sure our capable secretary has taken down. There needs to be a second on that.
I will second that.
So there's a second and there needs to be a voice vote.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
That's perfect because I'm often labeled as late to HHS or transportation because I'm in another meeting. So I think people need to know that. That's excellent. Okay, any new business?
I don't, Liz has like a really big record of making meetings. I just wanted to,
I just want to say thank you to Laura Flamian for being on the call to explain some of this stuff for us. And I think, your contribution to this bill list is awesome. So thank you so much. And again, Cheryl.
Thank you.
All right, so without objection, we are now adjourned.
Okay, did you get it?